Okay, I think we are. There we go. And we're live. Okay. Today we're going to talk about should I intermittent fast, and by that I mean should not me personally intermittent fast, but should people intermittent fast? I guess in general, if they're thinking about doing so. I just wanted to start with kind of one intermittent fasting is a methodology to people use to control weight, control their diet. It's a type of diet, and some people love to do it because of convenience. Some people think that it works great for weight loss. Some people believe that they feel better when they're intermittent fasting because they feel better in a fasted state. There's many reasons that people choose to try intermittent fasting and then continue to do so or not do so. Before I kind of dive into intermittent fasting, I talked about this in a previous video, but there are three levers of any diet. There's time restriction, which we're going to talk about today. Dietary restriction, which means what you're eating. So like restricting animal products, carbohydrates. If you're a vegan, if you're a vegetarian, there's things in your diet that you're restricting in your dietary restriction category. And then there's caloric restrictions, which is restricting how much you're eating. And these three levers, you can hold them at any time, and if you're not pulling any of them at any time, then you're what we call eating the American diet, which is obviously proven to not be very healthy. If you look at the obesity rates and the health of the American population, or you could include Canada in the American population because it's North America and whatnot, but Canada's a little healthier, which is good. Intermittent fasting involves entirely or partially abstaining from eating for a set amount of time before eating regularly again, which more or less is just fasting, but it's in fasting, if you don't know what fasting means, is just not eating. And you're in a fasted state when you're not when your body's running on no direct fuel that you've ingested or taken in. Some studies suggest that this way of eating may offer benefits such as fat loss, better health, increased longevity, and proponents claim that an intermittent fasting program is easier to maintain than traditional caloric restrict diets, just because it's a simple fast rule of if it's a certain time, don't eat, or if it is a time, then you should eat. Hi Natalie, I'm really sorry, but your sound is very low. My sound is low. How would I fix that? Do you mean I should speak up? Can you hear me? I haven't changed my microphone. Is your volume up by chance? I'm not I don't know, because I haven't changed my microphone from other lives. It's not at the top, I can hear you, but your sound is very low. Okay. Is it better if I move closer like that? Hello, 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 hello. Does that make any difference? Okay, alright, I'm trying to speak up. Okay, so if someone is eating, there you go, okay. If someone is eating, okay, so where was I? Okay, so intermittent fasting, what can you eat in a fasted state? Fasting is having no calories, but you can still ingest stuff. And those things are water or 0-calorie beverages like black coffee and tea. As soon as you add milk to your tea or coffee, that takes you out of the fasted state. If you add sugar, out of the fasted state because your body can burn sugar for energy or burn milk for energy. So just water or black coffee and tea. There are different methodologies for intermittent fasting, which just means like different time restricted diets. So the most popular one, to my understanding, is a 16 and 8 hour window, which means you don't eat anything for 16 hours that have calories. You don't put anything in your mouth that have calories for 16 hours, and then you have your feeding window for 8 hours. So an example would be that you can eat from 12 in the afternoon to 8 o'clock at night, which doesn't sound so bad. It's just more or less skipping breakfast. There are other intermittent fasting of things such as a weekly 24-hour fast. So we'll say some people on like a Monday will not eat anything for 24 hours and then they'll start eating again on the Tuesday. Some people will skip meals, which is more or less the 12 or the 16-8 window, and that is more or less just skipping breakfast. If you skip lunch, that doesn't help because you can still have your window within breakfast and dinner. So some people like to do alternating day fasting, so they'll eat one day and they'll skip another day of eating and then they'll go back to eating. There's many ways of intermittent fasting, but those are some of them. Tips for maintaining intermittent fasting are stay hydrated, because a lot of people, when they're intermittent fasting, they're thinking don't put anything in your mouth. And hydration is very important hydration is very important in general. So don't forget, if you're going to try intermittent fasting, stay hydrated, make sure you're drinking lots of water. It also helps with not being hungry while you're fasting. There are many ways to fast. I knew there were a couple, but if you Google it, there's a huge long list of what people do. You can do weeks at a time. There's a lot of stuff. And there's different like certain days you're doing certain times, certain other days you're doing other time. It's people have thought a lot about this. What was I gonna say? When you're fasting, when you're doing a big fast, like if you're fasting for 24 hours, try to avoid really strenuous exercise. You can do light exercise. It's just because your body doesn't have really fuel to recover when you're fasting, extreme fasting. So if you fast for like a week and you try and run a marathon, probably not a good idea. Just for example, like that's an extreme example, but that's the thinking. And when you're in your feeding window, make sure that you're eating good calories, because a lot of people, a good calorie meaning like macro or nutrient dense. So like you think of healthy foods, eat those kind of foods. It defeats the purpose if you are fasting for 16 hours and you have a 8-hour feeding window and you're just stuffing pizza, burgers, and name something that you think is unhealthy into that window, and you're thinking you're being healthy because you're intermittent fasting. It defeats the purpose completely, and you could have negative effects from that. It's just that's what I mean by the levers of the diet. It's good to pull one, if not more. In my belief, it's good to pull all three of those to an extent. But that's an example of if you just pull the intermittent fasting lever and you don't pull the other dietary or caloric restrictions, then you're not going to have benefits in health, or if your goal is weight loss, it's not going to do anything for you. Also, when you are thinking of intermittent fasting, you should think about what your goals are with intermittent fasting. If your goal is to lose weight and you think it's an easier way for you to restrict your because it's an easier way for you to restrict calories, just be wary that just because you're not eating doesn't mean that you're going to lose weight. Just because you're not eating within a certain amount of time doesn't mean you're going to lose weight. It has to do with calories in, calories out to an extent. balance it all to ensure beneficial in the long run. Yes, makes sense. Yes, good. Yeah, okay, perfect. Also, a lot of people thought that intermittent fasting was think that the intermittent fasting is really good for hormones, and there are studies that study that in a fasted state your body can think clearer and be more aware. But it's also important that if your goal is, for example, to maintain muscle mass, which I think most people would agree that they want to keep muscle on, or if your goal, some people, is to build muscle mass, intermittent fasting might not be the best way to do so, because your body, when it goes into the fasted state, has no direct fuel from food to burn, so it starts looking for other places, other parts of your body to burn fuel. One of them is going to be fat after it's already gone through the sugar stores and the glucose in your liver. But it's also good to understand that your body doesn't go from burning carbs directly to burning fat. You're also going to be burning some protein, which is muscle, when you're in a really starved state. So be aware of that. If your goal is to lose weight, more or less you're going to lose muscle and fat, but if you can avoid losing muscle, that's ideal. So if someone goes out for a week-long fast and they think they're just burning fat, they're not. They're also burning muscle. Some benefits of intermittent fasting. Thinking and memory have been thought to be improved because you're in a more of an aware state. Your body's not focusing on continuously digesting food. Your body's thinking, and if you think to our predecessors, when they were in a hungry state, they were thinking how to get food, and that's what their full capacity was going towards. So it makes sense theoretically. Intermittent fasting has been shown. Personally, I drink smoothies with protein powder added to ensure I get enough protein. Yeah, good. So protein, very important, just to maintain muscle mass and keep our muscles continuously recovering, because muscle breaks down relatively quickly. Muscle breaks down faster than you think. So you're for example, I think this is the number, don't quote me on this, your bicep, for example, the cells in your bicep will completely regenerate within 2 weeks. So if you look at your bicep, in 2 weeks' time, all the cells will be different. Just that, I could be wrong, because that sounds crazy, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So that just shows you how fast your body is continuously recovering and changing. So it's good to, if your goal is to maintain, to continually feed those sources of your body with good nutrients and protein. Okay, so drawbacks for intermittent fasting. In my belief, I'm not a big extreme diet person. I like to balance, like I said before, between these 3 levers to pull. But if you prefer intermittent fasting just because you're really busy and you don't want to worry about food during the morning or during lunchtime, and it's just easier and you feel better doing it, then go, by all means, do it. It's all about finding what's best for you. Intermittent fasting had gained a lot of attention a few years ago because there was a study that came out in mice that looked at it was published in a very respected medical journal, but it compared 2 groups of people. The people were studied for 12 weeks. One group ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they were allowed to snack whenever, so they were allowed to do whatever they were doing before. And another group had an 8-hour feeding window, and they looked at, would this 8-hour feeding window lose more weight? And the 8-hour feeding window just means intermittent fasting. And at the end of the study, they showed that no weight loss had been found. Both groups lost about a pound on average, but there was no significant difference between the groups, which is important to note. Which goes again to show that if your goal is to lose weight with intermittent fasting, you can't just be pulling that lever and expect to lose weight. It has to be you have to be doing other things. like caloric or dietary restrictions, and yeah. So okay, the study also didn't look at any dietary caloric restrictions, which is why you have to pull the other levers. One thing to note is that someone will do intermittent fasting for, we'll say, a week, and they'll notice that, oh my god, I lost I don't know, 3-4 pounds. That is your body adjusting and and understanding where to eat now and how to eat. So if you're not restricting the other things, you're just eating as much as you can within the window, your body naturally will try and not lose weight, or and sometimes that leads to people gaining weight because it's easier to eat food than not eat food most times, especially in the society we live. You might notice that you lose weight for the first few, I want to say, week or so, but long term your body will go back to a regression towards the mean, which you won't lose weight long term if you're only doing intermittent fasting. So just keep that in mind. If you notice that oh, Robert was wrong, I lost weight, it'll probably come back just because you're eating as much as you can within that fixed time frame, and your body will adapt and eat as much as it needs to maintain that weight. Unless you're thinking outside just the time frame of feeding. One last thing I wanted to say was there was a study that was done. This is the study that made intermittent fasting become popular. And there's one thing that a lot of people didn't think about, and now looking back, scientists are starting to realize that that's probably the difference and the reason that we don't get the same results as the study had showed. But it was a study that was published in 2014, and it was a study in mice, and they did 2 parts of the study, but the easiest part to think about is they took the 2 parts of the study are they took 2 groups of fat mice and 2 groups of fat mice, and then they took just normal sized mice. But we'll think about the fat mice. So the fat mice were 2 groups. They were fed a high fat, high sugar diet. One was time restricted, one wasn't. So they were given the same food, because mice, they drip out of a I don't know if you've ever seen a mouse in a cage. They drip the food out of a faucet or something. Whatever the mouse feeds off of. And the high fat, high sugar diet were given to both mice. The mouse group that were time restricted lost weight and were healthier, and the fat mice stayed fat. And a lot of people thought, oh wow, we were feeding them, we gave them access to high fat, high calorie, and this was done over a long time frame. I think it was 12 weeks also. Wow, we gave these mice the same amount of food. They could eat out of they were in the same types of cages, and they only restricting their time feeding window to 8 hours. So they're allowed to eat for 8 hours, and not eating the food was not accessible to them for 16 hours. The mice were able to stay lean or lose weight, and the other group was able to stay lean for that time frame, which made a lot of people think that, wow, so intermittent fasting makes you lose weight long term and everything of that sort. The catch with this study that was made, it is the core of what made intermittent fasting popular in headlines and what made intermittent fasting a thing of today, is because the difference between mice and humans is that mice will starve in 24 hours. They will die of starvation within around 24 hours, and humans take roughly 1 to 2 months to starve, to die of starvation. So comparing the results of mice losing weight under the intermittent fasting window of 8 and 16 compared to humans is not a good way to do something if someone's goal is to lose weight and stay lean and stay healthy, because obviously there's different diseases that come with being overweight. Specifically because the human and the mice metabolic systems are not comparable. So that's a big takeaway for me that made me realize that intermittent fasting, if someone's goal is to lose weight, might not be the best source of just saying, oh, it's easy, just don't eat breakfast. So keep that in mind. That goes back to I know I've said it a bunch of times during this live, but it's all about balance and eating healthy. If your goal is to, and then you can adjust those different levers to whatever you prefer. And just keep that in mind. So I guess the question was, should I intermittent fast? I know it doesn't, it's not a yes or no answer, but it depends. But if your goal is to, it all depends on your goals. If your goal is to lose weight, don't just rely on intermittent fasting because it's only one of the 3 levers. And if you pull one of them, it's not going to work. So just keep that in mind. And if your goal is to build muscle and a whole other discussion, but just, should I intermittent fast? It depends on your goals, but just the big takeaway is that it's all about the balance between the 3, not just pulling one lever. That's all I had. I don't know how long that took. Oh, 25. Okay. Yeah. So if you have any questions, ask me. But read up on it. You can look into the studies that I mentioned. One of them was published in the first study I mentioned for the human study was published in JAMA, which is a big journal, and then JAMA, and then the other study I mentioned was studied the mouse study was published in 2014, was published in Cell, which is another big journal. And if you're looking for like podcasts about it, a great podcaster is Dr. Peter Attia. He's a big believer in intermittent fasting, and recently he's been kind of realizing that just because he has patients that he will tell to do intermittent fasting, he's realizing that it's part of those 3 that he's healthy diets are part of those 3, not just pulling one. And he goes in to say that if your goal is to have the same benefits that mice have, then maybe you should only be eating for 2 hours or 1 hour, or only like once a week. So it goes to the extreme of, I don't think telling people to eat for 2 hours of the day or telling people to eat for 1 day a week is realistic. So it's all about balance if you want to be healthy long term. Okay, that's it. Okay, bye guys. Thank you. See you in a couple weeks.